Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy Podcast. I'm Ani Anderson.
And I'm Brian Trzaskos. Join us as we explore the science
and art of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools.
Strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional.
Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence.
If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started. Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy Podcast. Ani, how are you?
I'm dreading today a little bit, Brian. I'll be honest with you. I've been thinking about it all week.
You've been dreading our story that we're going to do today?
Looks so good. I'm going to have to,
I'll make you look good.
I'll have to, I just got to give a little bit of my background too.
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
that's all a part of the story, right? This is all kind of an important
As long
thing,
as I get to tell a little bit of my side too, because otherwise I just sound like a complete a-hole.
Yeah, I don't want to say it. Okay, anyway, welcome to this week's episode. This is episode number 80, and this is part 2 of our wellness coaching for chronic pain kind of 2-part series.
I loved last week's episode. I mean, I've heard you talk about this stuff for years and years and years, and it's just so fascinating, Brian. And I think so hopeful too.
Yeah, so last week we dove deep into the science. And one of the things we talked about last week was, even though sometimes the science feels very complicated, and actually I kind of think it's exciting because I like to see all the connections, but it can feel very complicated.
It's a lot.
That does not mean that the practices have to be.
Right.
And I like to say that actually the more complicated and the more interactions that you see within the science actually continues to validate how powerful very simple practices are.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what we're going to kind of dig into today. We're talking about, as a wellness coaching professional, therapeutic professional, even a person who's dealing with chronic pain yourself, anybody we listed last week as far as, hey, who is this podcast for? Like, you're going to be able to use these tools to make a difference in your life or in your clients' lives, your friends, your neighbors' lives, around the whole idea of chronic pain.
Yeah, it's such a gift.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of look at this in 3 basic parts for as far as practices are concerned. And the first part is the idea of mindfulness. And so we've done several podcasts on mindfulness. We did one several weeks ago where we talked about going from mindful to mindful from mindless, or from mindless to mindful.
I can tell you, I got some really great feedback about how people in the community really liked that episode,
cool.
By the way.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead and, after this one, go back and listen to that one for more details on mindfulness specifically. But let's just do a really quick recap. Why is mindfulness helpful with chronic pain? Well, we talked about chronic pain is biopsychosocial. It's never just one of those areas. And it's also, remember, pain is output, not input. So if the output is, it's output is pain. If the determination that the brain is making about the sensory input, if it has to do with threat, remember that was kind of the key word, the key theme was threat. If the sensations are threatening, then the brain will create pain. So rather than trying to chase the pain around the body, what if we just do what we can do to help decrease the threat?
Right. Yeah. Watching this happen is so cool.
Yeah. Because
it works
so amazing, right?
Yeah, it works.
Because we have, remember the equation is sensations plus beliefs plus memories plus emotions. So those are the 4 parts. If you can just take out one of those parts, then it's no longer a threat.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, working with all of those parts for anybody, even people who know what they're doing, is a lot. If you were going to work with if you had to work with all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you said, it can be simple. Yeah.
So we're going to work with kind of each one of them and mindfulness is a great way to start working on these specifically, because mindfulness, you actually do get effectiveness in the sensory base itself, but you also get effectiveness in the emotional regions You also do get in the belief regions also. And memories, well, mindfulness, we're not working with memories necessarily, but we don't have to have an effect apparently when you look at mindfulness research. So what is mindfulness, first of all? Well, let's just look at the four tenets of mindfulness just to set it up really quick. So they are, we practice moment to moment awareness. So and mindfulness, like we talked about in past podcasts, can be sitting on a cushion, but it can be taking a walk.
Right,
It could
right.
be, you can be mindful making dinner, mindful eating, any of
Yep.
those
It
things.
doesn't have to be sitting there meditating in the typical fashion
Right. Yeah.
that
So
is so hard for people.
exactly. But we are focusing on being in the present moment and we keep bringing our attention back to the present moment. We're also practicing non-judgmental witnessing of ourself and our habitual patterns of behavior. So that story I told last week about when I noticed that frustration was linked in with every one of my chronic pain episodes, that would be that, right? I wasn't judging myself for being frustrated. I was actually, before I realized, I was judging everyone else. Right. But uh, but
Well, how about that?
but when I kind of detached and I became a witness, I was like, oh my God, look how frustrated I was. And that's a practice of mindfulness. And by the way, I was practicing mindfulness
That's what I was going to say.
before this, and that really helped to kind of crack
That's
that open for me.
why you
Yeah,
could get to that place
exactly.
because you were practicing.
Yeah, I was practicing I was
Yes.
making it a practice to witness my thoughts by my beliefs, my behaviors, right?
Yeah.
That's a tenet of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing we do is we disengage from strong attachments to beliefs, thoughts, and emotions. Beliefs, thoughts, and emotions, right? So think about it. Those are actually the components that go into a chronic pain formula,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we're disengaging from attachment to those things, we start to disconnect the equation, the pain equation. And then finally, we're practicing non-reactivity. So those are the four tenets of mindfulness. Now, when there's been a lot of studies done with pain and mindfulness, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And when these studies are done, I'm just going to read for you kind of like some of the consistent results that happen. So this is what happens. It's more than these things. I pulled these out specifically because they have to do with what we're talking about, but they're actually more demonstrable results of practicing mindfulness than just these things. So we have decreased perception of pain. Well, there you go.
Right
Okay, so
there.
check
Yeah.
that box. You want decreased perception of pain, practice some mindfulness. Increased ability to tolerate pain. So what that means is that when the sensations get higher, you have an increased ability to actually be with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's kind of cool. Reduced stress, anxiety, and depression. Okay, so we talked last time about the threat orientation kind of makes us feel tighter, more
Mm-hmm.
stressed. Safety orientation helps us feel more relaxed. So if we're experiencing more stress, that adds to more pain.
And that informs those loops you were talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, exactly. So that's with mindfulness, we reduce that. Okay. Diminished use of medication. Wow, so powerful when we think about that. And then enhanced empathy, compassion, and key word here that we're going to get to in just a bit, interoception.
Mhm.
Enhanced ability to navigate with your interoception. So just kind of put that word on a shelf for a second because we're going to come back to it. I just want to read one of our favorite authors, John Kabat-Zinn,
Yeah.
who has written several books on mindfulness. You know, is kind of the father of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And anyway, so one of the studies they did on pain, this was a quote from him. The process of pain reduction occurred by an attitude of detached observation toward a sensation when it becomes prominent in the field of awareness, and to observe with similar detachment the accompanying but independent cognitive processes which led to evaluation and labeling of the sensation as painful,
Hmm.
as hurt. So, what he's saying is that when you're practicing mindfulness, one of the key elements of this is kind of like a two-part thing. Number one, you are in a detached way observing the sensations that you're experiencing, number one. And number two, you're also detaching from the accompanying the judgment of the sensation. That's essentially what he's saying in that statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we've seen all the time
Yeah.
with with our students.
Yeah. So that's why mindfulness is so core and so key. And we say this a lot here that really mindfulness is one of the foundational elements, I think, of probably most somatic practices, but
Yeah.
definitely what we do here at the Somatic Coaching Academy is all underpinned by mindfulness.
Underpinned everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, we're not saying let's sit down and practice mindfulness,
Right.
but it's a practice that's built into everything that we do here because it's core to this process that John Kabat-Zinn is describing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So what's a practice if you're dealing with chronic pain or you're working with people with chronic pain, then mindfulness is a go-to practice that actually cannot be moved. I mean, you can't get around it. If you want to help someone manage, deal with, transcend their chronic pain non-pharmacologically, then mindfulness it's on that road. Like you gotta do it
Yeah.
pretty much. You can't go around it. So
Yeah.
that's something you really need to have awareness of. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to kind of talk about a little bit, just I had a note here and it kind of ran away from me. I don't know where it went. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. So when we've looked at kind of chronic pain, working with people with chronic pain, well, for a long time, we use things like Tai Chi and Qigong with people with chronic pain. That's kind of our shtick. A lot of people do yoga and those sorts of things. But what I wanted to know is what are the commonalities among all somatic practices?
Mhm.
Like, why are somatic practices so important for helping people with chronic pain? So, number one, mindfulness, uber important. You got to do that. Otherwise, you're really not going to be able to work with someone holistically. The next thing is somatic practices. Uber important. You've got to be using somatic practices with people from a wellness coaching perspective or a non-pharmacological therapeutic perspective if you want to help people transcend chronic pain. You have to. I mean, that's a part of this process, right?
Yeah.
So what are the similarities amongst all somatic practices? That's what I want to know. And you know what? Somebody wrote a paper on that. So
That's
yeah,
handy.
so there's was a paper in Frontiers in Psychology, and Emma Meehan and Bernie Carter were the authors of this paper, and they didn't specifically look at like Eastern methodologies. They actually looked at more Western focused methodologies, believe it or not, like Feldenkrais and Alexander technique.
Oh,
And actually,
interesting.
dance was another thing they included in there.
Hmm.
They did pull in Tai Chi, they did pull in Qigong, they did pull in a little
But it
yoga.
wasn't just
It wasn't
Eastern.
just Eastern.
It's
They're
cool.
looking at like what are the binding factors with all somatic practices.
Hmm.
And they came up with three basic
Oh,
categories that you
cool.
have to kind of, if you're doing somatic practices, these are the three categories that you must be included.
Uh-huh.
And they are you're working with interoception,
Mm.
exteroception, and proprioception.
Neat.
Okay. So a
Yeah.
lot of septions there.
Hmm.
Let's dig in each one of those.
Inception.
Inceptions, right? So we have interoception. So interoception well, I'm gonna give you the definitions from this study, and then we can talk about them a little bit. What they said is that interoceptors are located in the internal organs and soft tissues, receiving sensory information concerning internal visceral body processes. So interoception is what's going on in your guts, basically, in your visceral organs, internal body sensors, kind of thing, and picking up the interoceptive information and then bringing that into the brain for processing,
Hmm.
right? On a past podcast, I think we've talked about, and if not, maybe I was imagining I was doing this, how ancient interoception is.
How ancient.
Ancient, yeah, how much older it actually is than our somatic nervous system, our central nervous system. It's because interoceptive nervous systems are actually in organisms that are very,
Oh,
very old
I
in
see.
terms of the way they're processed, because interoception is primarily unmyelinated.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have the myelin fibers wrapped around it. So it's not as fast as myelinated fibers, but it brings with it more ancient and raw data of information. So there's something about our interoceptive nervous system that is very ancient and has old wisdom associated with it, if you will. Our guts,
Yeah,
kind of how we intuitively know things in our guts. Anyway, I think we did a past podcast on that, but I
I
don't
think so.
remember exactly which one we were talking about that in. So, what about exteroception? So, interoception is internal, exteroception is external. So here's the definition of exteroception from this study. Exteroceptors found in the skin and connective tissue are responsible for monitoring the outer environment through touch,
Mm.
including several kinds of sensations such as pressure, heat, cold, pain, and vibration. So if you think about last week, we talked about the four types of sensors, right? Those are exteroceptors. So they're actually picking up environmental information from outside of us and then bringing that to the nervous system so that it can be processed. But these sensors are also they're inside of our skin too, because if you're touching your skin, you're actually, it's not just on the surface, it's underneath the
Yeah.
surface also, but you also have that kind of in tendons and those kinds of things also, right? So you have that information coming up into the nervous system. And then finally, proprioception. So proprioceptors are found in the joints, ligaments and tendons, muscles, and the inner ear are cumulatively responsible for registering movement, balance, and body position in space,
It makes
right?
sense.
So when we're doing somatic practices, whatever somatic practice you're doing, whatever you call it, in some way, it is informing and modifying interoception. It's informing and modifying exteroceptors, and is modifying and informing proprioceptors,
Which is basically all of them.
which is basically all of it,
Yeah.
which is basically all of the sensory information that's flowing into our nervous system. So remember, the chronic pain equation is sensations plus thoughts plus beliefs plus memories plus emotions, right? So sensations are one of the things that you actually can change in that framework. And when you're doing somatic practices, that's that part of the equation that you're modifying and changing. Because if you can change the sensations that someone's experiencing and teach them to consciously alter and modify and reframe the sensations that they're experiencing, now their brain and nervous system gets different input,
Right.
which creates a different a judgment of what they're experiencing, which oftentimes helps you take the fork of the road towards safety rather than the fork of the road towards threat.
I noticed you corrected yourself when you went to say thoughts and you said, no, it beliefs.
Yeah.
And I'm making my own assumptions about what I think the difference is there. And I'm just curious
Yeah.
for you.
So for me, beliefs are what we've been programmed with. Like our thoughts aren't always what we've been programmed with, right? We can get a thought that's like a new thought, and that's not necessarily something we've been programmed with. But a belief is something that we've been historically programmed with, that we project back out onto the world as we go through the world, making meaning of it before it actually shows up. And so when we have a sensory experience come up, and we reflexively gets filtered through our history, which is our belief systems.
Yeah. Cool.
So is that the way you're kind of thinking about it?
Yeah, because I was imagining as you were talking that a part of the belief systems actually is how we feel and our sensations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how we feel about our sensations. Exactly. Perfect. That's exactly said it better than I did. Okay. So far, when we talk about the practices that a wellness coach or coaching professional or therapeutic professional for that matter can bring to the work that they're doing with people with chronic pain, mindfulness is core to that work, absolutely. And also somatic practices are core to that work, absolutely. Because when we're doing mindfulness, we're actually engaging with the sensations, the beliefs, and the emotions primarily, or actually we're disengaging with them, which is, kind of the idea. When we do somatic practices, we are specifically working with modifying the sensory stuff for sure. And that's the primary one. And of course, nothing's ever separate. So that's actually going to trickle into some of those other areas. But we're really helping people to consciously change their sensory base so that they're not a victim of whatever historically they have going on
Right.
in the loops that are going on in the sensory motor loops.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We gotta kind of break those sensory motor loops with create a new pattern. So somatic practices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking from a business perspective that as a wellness professional, we get to pick what kinds of somatic practices we want to be bringing to our people based on, for sure, what our interests are and also what's going to meet our client base.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why we've developed the core centering program and teach it like we do is it really meets a vast majority of people. It's so unassuming and anybody can do it and it's easy. And that, as a wellness practitioner, you get to decide what lights you up and also what's going to meet your clients so that you can have a thriving practice that you love and makes a big difference.
Love it. That's great. Okay. Last bit here is what we call sensation-based coaching. So
I've heard of that.
You heard that before, right? Yeah.
I don't know where.
So yeah, well, let's talk about it. Maybe it'll ring a bell for you.
Okay.
Okay. So sensation-based coaching. Before we jump into this, I do want to quote though, a year-long Australian study of health and wellness coaching showed, so here, this is, wellness coaching for chronic pain, showed that after 12 months in the program, statistically and clinically significant reductions were observed for pain intensity and pain-related interference. So what they did in this group
Okay. I
is
was gonna say, well, what did they do, Brian?
well, they had a group of people that were experiencing chronic pain,
Mm-hmm.
and then two groups. One group was the control group. The other group got health and wellness coaching.
So they just got health and wellness coaching.
So health and
Oh,
wellness
really?
coaching was
That's
a part of
interesting.
what they did,
Gotcha.
and they had a
Not
statistic.
sensation-based
No,
coaching,
not even specifically sensation based, but
just wellness
just wellness
coaching.
coaching,
Interesting.
right?
It's like a coaching.
That coaching, right? So we do
That's
know that
cool.
coaching helps reduce pain,
Well, that would make sense
right? Coaching
because
helps reduce
a
pain.
lot of times coaching works with beliefs and
Yes,
emotions.
exactly.
Not everybody works with sensations
Right,
or the ability to help people with threat.
right.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool, right?
Neat.
Okay, so really what we need to kind of talk about is this idea of when we do sensation-based coaching, what we're really doing is we're helping people to consciously remodel, right? Consciously remodel their relationship with their interoception,
Mm-hmm.
with their exteroception, and with their proprioception,
Right.
right? So, I mean, coaching, right? Coaching does something, and we do sensation-based coaching. We're taking the coaching processes specifically into a remodel, somatic coaching,
Right.
right?
Into a sensation-based remodeling.
Right, exactly.
Not all coaching does that.
Not all coaching does that, right? Health and wellness coaching will do a lot of behavior change, those kinds of things. So
Sure.
that can be successful.
Sure.
Coaching can be successful.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get into changing interoception, exteroception, proprioception directly, then you need to be doing that through a somatic avenue.
And somatic sensation-based
Sensation-based
coaching.
avenue, yeah.
Right.
Sensation-based avenue.
Because when you were bringing up before about somatic practices too, we're not saying that somatic practices in and of themselves do that remodeling
Yep.
thing. They help a lot. They're not remodeling. That's what we're doing with the sensation-based coaching.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So let's even take that a little further, Ani, and talk about like kind of like complete coach. Like, so we talk about if you were doing wellness coaching for chronic pain and you wanted to say that you were doing complete coaching, then you have to be working on all three of these biopsychosocial frameworks, right? It's a
Yeah.
biopsychosocial phenomenon.
Right.
So you have to be working in all those areas if you're going to call it complete that you're doing. And we're going to work with modifying, remodeling all of those. So when it comes to like the body, what's the body or bio kind of strategies? What we do here at the Somatic Coaching Academy is we are really working to consciously modify those sensory motor pathways. Right. So we're working the body. Now we're doing that somatic practices. So people, yes, they're moving their body. Yes, they're moving their body in certain ways. They're coordinating their breath and movement, but they're also paying attention to how they're moving. And then we also have a process that we do with them, cross mapping, where they actually consciously remodel their sensory experience.
Yeah, and then moving farther into that, the advanced strategies that we do in the Somatic Coach program, where they're actually repatterning and working with more than just the sensations, really working with people's beliefs and going deeper.
Yeah. Well, so that's the next part. So when we talk about the mental emotional strategies, because there's the psychological, right? So biopsycho, we need to really help people to remodify their beliefs and also give them avenues of releasing and processing repressed emotions. Like that's got to be a part of it. If you're not doing that, you're not doing a complete program.
Okay, so pause, because repressed emotions, woo, woo, aren't we talking about therapy? Hang on a second, because when you do it from a sensation base, you're doing it in the present moment, and that's not getting wrapped up in past therapeutic stories.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Present moment.
Yeah, really, what we're working on in the present moment is helping people to disengage from how they are presently associating with their sensory experience, right? So that's what we're doing with coaching. And then finally, the social part. Right. Well, the social part is all about a shift in relational dynamics.
And where does relational dynamics start? In you.
Yeah, in you, between you and you.
You and you first.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to do a complete coach, you got to have all those three of those things: biological, psychological, sociological. And that's what we do here with our sensation-based motivation coaching program at Somatic Coaching Academy, right? We tick all those boxes. And that's why when I'm working with clients that are dealing with chronic pain, why it's so successful in the way we're working with them, and our students as well.
Yeah, and a lot of our students have, had prior education, Brian, and they just feel like there's a piece missing. And when people go through the program, actually, it's funny because people go through the program and they say, "This is the missing piece," all the time. And I have gone through lengths of conversation with folks to say, "What is that missing piece?" And it's different for everybody. Because
That's interesting. It's a
every,
different missing piece. Yeah.
because everybody's missing a little bit different piece of the missing piece puzzle,
Yeah.
like of the complete puzzle. And that makes sense.
Okay, cool. So can we, now it's time for the story.
I
Honey,
you forgot.
well, we've got to I think to highlight like how does this all come together in a real world experience
Okay.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
So do you want to start telling the story or do you want me to start telling the story?
I'll start.
You go for it.
I'll start. Um, Brian and I had gotten together fairly recently and we're blending a family. We had been living with each other for what, like 6 months, a
Yeah, something
year?
like that. Under a year.
It had not been a long time. I had recently found coaching. I didn't know what coaching was as a profession, and I had recently found that coaching was a thing. And I had joined my very first coaching program. I hadn't even started yet. I was really excited, but also I was told by the people I was studying with that, this is a really big deal for a lot of you. And when you change subconscious programming, things can come up that try to prevent you from moving forward because your subconscious is going to try to make you stop changing. I listened, I heard that, and I put it somewhere in the back of my mind. And I was getting ready in the morning to go to my very first day of my very first coaching program. And I just want to pause for a moment and say, I had no idea at the time how much I was going to fall in love with coaching.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm getting emotional. Like,
Yeah.
I love coaching so much.
Hmm.
It was like the precipice of finding my purpose and who I am in the world, and like my whole life starting to make sense
Yeah.
going to this thing. It was a big
It was
deal.
a big deal. Yeah. This is a big day for both of us. This is like a Saturday,
It was a
right? It was a
Saturday. It
Saturday. Yeah.
was a Saturday. I was getting ready to go. I was making everybody breakfast. So we had three little kids at the time. They were probably around
Like eight,
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 eight, and
and five.
five.
Yeah.
For it was also a huge deal that I was leaving the kids in other people's care because I'm a big mama bear and I like to be involved in everything. And also, like, talk about this one. The kids were going to their teacher's
Yeah, they
wedding.
were going to their teacher's wedding that day, and it was my responsibility to take them to the wedding.
Yes, you were
I
taking
was
the
on
kids to
to
the
take the
wedding.
kids to the wedding.
So I was trusting my new partner to with my kids and our kids going to this thing I really wanted to go to go to the kids the teacher's wedding. And by the way, she was a friend
Oh, she's
too.
amazing.
Really,
Yeah,
really,
amazing person.
yeah. And
Kids
so
loved her.
yeah,
The community loved her. She was just, it was like going to be a big deal for her.
this was high stakes all around.
Yeah, high stakes.
That's what we're trying to.
Yeah.
So I'm making breakfast in the kitchen. I've got my bags packed. I believe the kids were still asleep. And I hear Ani coming from somewhere. Ani. And I come and I peek my head into the bedroom.
Mm.
You were on the ground. I thought you were stretching because that's what you do.
Yeah.
You wake up and you stretch. And
And my back went out and I was on the ground. I couldn't move. And I think I just literally got out of bed and put a
went to the
sock on
floor.
it, put a sock on or something. I don't know. It was something what typically for me, would happen. It would just, it's sometimes I would just be walking and picking something up off the driveway and I'd end up on my hands and knees. So whatever, I don't remember what I was doing, but I do remember I was on the ground.
This was the first time that I saw you down in my experience with you as a human. I also had never seen this happen to somebody before. My mom had a back episode when I was really young, and I don't even remember it. So this was not in my frame of reference. In my mind, I'm like, okay, get up. Like, your back hurts. Get up. I have no preconceived notion of
Yeah.
what's going on. So then you say something like,
Yeah.
I
I
can't get
can't get
up.
up. I mean, my back is in so much spasm. Like I cannot move. I cannot get up off the carpet.
And I walked out of the room and I thought to myself, I can't go to my event. That was the belief system that because this is my responsibility, the kids are my responsibility, to some degree, you're my responsibility. Like, I need to stay. This is my role. And some little angel or devil on my shoulder at the moment was like, this is exactly what they warned you against. Something's going to come up to prevent you from going. And this is it. You have to go for you. And it was the first time I think I ever really consciously made in my, especially mom life, a decision for me. And I knew I had to go.
Yeah.
And I went back in the room and I said, I have to go to this. And you're still on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I know you have to go to it. And so we called my ex-wife actually, and my ex-wife took the kids to the wedding.
No, it gets better, Brian. You so we call your ex-wife and we say, "Can you take the kids to the wedding?" And she says, "Yes." Thank goodness the kids can still go to the wedding. And then like half an hour later we got a call from her. She got a flat
Oh,
tire.
that's right. Her car. Yeah, she got a flat tire. I forgot about that. See, I was on the floor, so I missed all that.
She got a flat tire. And I'm still saying to myself, I have to go even if the kids miss their teacher's wedding. I still have to go. Who took them? Did she get my ex's car? I think. Did she
Something happened. Anyway,
somehow? So
so
I packed the kids. I get busy packing the kids in the car who have not had breakfast, who aren't dressed. We're grabbing clothes and things for them to wear. And
Ani leaves me a glass of water and my phone and leaves. And so now I am in the house, like all by myself, which honestly, I don't mind being by myself most of the time.
I know, but I feel guilty every time I hear this
No, but
story.
it's got a really amazing
It
ending,
has a
right? So it was
really
all
amazing
really important.
ending.
So I'm absolving you of feeling any guilt.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
none coming from me. So
And when I hear the things like this has happened, like you were talking about last week, like this kind of thing happened to me before. I couldn't even help myself get to the bathroom. I had no concept of how bad this was for
yeah.
you. Probably, thank goodness, I probably wouldn't have made the choices that I had made had I had some kind of different concept. Like, but I'm still glad that I did
But
because it
well,
was
thank God you
amazing.
made the decision you made. So
Holy cow.
so Ani walks out on me.
I did with a glass of water on your phone
The last one on my phone. And so now I'm laying on the
with the
floor
kids.
by myself in
Yeah.
the house, thinking I have about a couple hours probably before I'm going to need to go to the bathroom, and I have no idea how I'm going to actually get there. So I remember that experience I had a few months earlier, actually. It was probably wasn't that a
Wasn't that
year, it
long
wasn't
ago,
that long
right?
before that.
Oh
It was
man.
several months earlier, maybe a year earlier, where I had that experience that happened. And I had a couple experiences actually between that pivotal time when I first noticed that frustration and this episode, where I had been kind of practicing a little bit with paying attention and being mindful and that kind of stuff.
That's good.
So now all of a sudden I'm on the floor, and instead of kind of panicking and getting angry and frustrated, I just decided to just start breathing and start doing my what I now call the first aid for backs program. And I start doing some deep breathing, and I just start doing some coordinated movement. And then I start doing some other specific kind of movements, and I just start to relax, and I start to become very, very quiet, very calm in my system. Very, I mean, my body's freaking out in terms of a lot of spasm and a lot of what I would call pain at the time. But I'm observing it. I'm being very observational, and I'm just breathing and moving and moving and breathing and trying to relax and opening up and doing these little practices on the floor and becoming very present, very kind of meditative and mindful in the practice. And after a little bit, it didn't really feel like that long. It was maybe within an hour of doing some breathing and movement practices. I surrendered kind of. I just kind of surrendered to the process. And as I surrendered, I had this massive flooding come through me of feeling abandoned.
I wonder
And
why.
but it wasn't because of you, Ani. What flooded back to me when I was 14 years old
Oh,
and my grandmother died.
yeah.
That's what it all went back to. It went back to this deep pain around feeling abandoned when I was 14 from someone who was so important to me. Because the way that she died, I just wasn't able to, I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the support, I didn't have the whatever to process through all of
Yeah.
that. And so I had been holding on to that. I've been holding on to not feeling that pain for 27 years.
Yeah.
I've been holding on to not feeling or not re-experiencing exactly what I was re-experiencing in that moment of all of that deep pain of feeling abandoned and alone and lost. And I had done a little bit of therapy between then and now, and I had done some pretty intense journaling, story writing about that between then and now, but I'd never experienced this depth as I had never allowed myself to get that deep into my body experience. And as I'm on the floor just sobbing and just letting all of this flow, and this wouldn't have happened because, like, ironically, it's all set up with
Exactly.
symbolically Ani leaving me,
Yeah.
which symbolically sets up that situation of abandonment, which I never, hold you responsible for any of that because this is, but I
All
could
the
see
pieces of the
all the pieces.
puzzle
It
were
was like the
perfect.
universe knew that in this moment that's what I needed in order to get to the depth to kind of release all this stuff. And
Hmm.
the universe just coordinates things
Sure
in
does.
magical ways, right? Coordinated it for you
Totally.
to overcome your own inner resistance
Yep.
and the belief and concept you had about yourself to become to step into like your calling as a coach
100%.
and help me overcome my limitations and really let go of that deep pain of feeling abandoned that I've been repressing for so long
Yeah.
and been masked with frustration and anger about the situation, all that kind of stuff. So it was a perfect storm, a
And that's how
wonderful,
it
perfect
works.
storm. That's exactly how it
That's how
worked.
it works.
So, but here's the story. As I released all this pain and I went through this cathartic process, which again didn't seem like it lasted very long, maybe another half an hour or something like that. Anyway, within 2 hours, I got up off the floor and went and used the bathroom. And then I walked 2 miles. I went outdoors and I walked up and down our road 2 miles. And I was like, what the heck just happened? Like, I would ordinarily be in bed for
For
four
days.
days, 5 days, a week, maybe, not being able to move. And I walked 2 miles. And it had a little bit of something lingering there, like, but it was nothing problematic. And I was just like walking around in this, I don't know, like this semi bewildered state. And so Ani texts me, it's like sometime during
Yeah.
the day and says, how you
How you
doing? I'm
doing?
like, you won't believe it. I just walked 2 miles.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, great. Well, she didn't have any
I
reference
did
for
not
it.
have the context. I'm thinking,
But
okay.
for me, this is a miracle. It's a miracle. And but even more than that miracle was this fascinating nugget. When Ani came back home and she walks in the door, my pain came back. And that was the first time I also noticed a whole other thread of my life around how I used illness to get attention.
Right.
And I want to just like literally like just curl up in a ball and throw up when I say that, honestly. And not as much as I used to.
It's very
But
relatable.
I
Yeah.
recognize now that on a subconscious level how I was using pain and illness for attention because of the family dynamics I grew up when I was young. We're not going to go into all those right now, but I very clearly see why that pattern was in place the way that it was in place. And so that also kind of I noticed, oh my God, why did my pain just come back when you walked in that door?
Hmm.
There's that social piece, right? There's that relational piece
Right.
that also is your environment's always activating, whether you realize it or not, it's there all the time activating it. And so I mean, we can just kind of keep going on about this story, but that's my personal story. That's why I feel so called to this work. And that's why I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that when we help people transcend their pain experience, we must meet them on all three planes of this, that bio, psychosocial planes: body, mind, spirit. We need to work on all three planes if we want to completely remit what's going on in people's lives. And I have never had a back pain episode again associated with frustration since that time. And that was 12 years ago now.
And that's impressive because we have blended a family and built a business together.
Yeah. I mean, I've injured my back doing other things like playing pickleball and, skiing and that sort of stuff, but never again around one of those frustration related episodes.
Yeah.
And so that has been completely healed and relieved and released from my life. And I'm so incredibly grateful for that. And I love to be able to give that gift to other people.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing this incredible story. Brian, it's just such an incredible story. And the way that it's interwoven with everything, I think is so fascinating. So I really appreciate it, and being self-aware enough and vulnerable enough to be able to talk about all those different things, so that other people can learn from your experience. It's just amazing.
Cool. Thanks, Penny. I'm so grateful for that you're my partner in this journey, and that we have had those kinds of experiences together in our life that have helped me to grow and evolve and become really the person I think I've always been meant to be in the world. And you've been a huge part of that. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Brian.
Cool.
Ooh, okay. Thanks for listening to this one, folks. And we can't wait to hear your comments and your insights from this episode. So if you're watching or listening someplace where you can leave them below, do that. You can leave us comments and insights on social media, and of course in our inbox at info@somaticcoachingacademy.com.
Thanks so much, everyone.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself.
Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.